Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so grateful to have you here with us. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having this program.
Oh, thank you. We really appreciate that. I'm going to invite everyone to put themselves on mute as we are getting started. And I am going to start us off by just offering a little bit of framing for our conversation tonight. So we are here doing a Quieting the Silence program, a storytelling event about visible and invisible disabilities. And this is a program, this Quieting the Silence is a platform that we run in a lot of spaces. That we run in a lot of spaces that really focuses on highlighting people's lived experience with mental illness and addiction. And in this case, we are also expanding that to people's lived experience with visible and invisible disabilities. And so we are so grateful to be partnering on this event tonight. So my name is Carly. I am I'm a female. I am wearing a black and white shirt. I have medium length hair with glasses, and my background behind me has a lot of pictures on the wall. And all of our speakers tonight will be offering visual descriptions of themselves, which is a way of conveying information about a person in an equivalent way as possible for those who are blind or low vision to foster greater ease and connection. So thank you so much to all of our speakers for doing this tonight. Our flow for the evening, we will do some brief introductions of the organizations who have put on this event together. We will do some framing in Judaism. Why are we doing this as Jewish organizations? We will get to hear from our speakers. And then we will have time for Q&A at the end. As you've got questions for our speakers, please feel free to put them into the chat. You can either message them to the entire chat, or you can send a direct message in the chat to my colleague, Erica, who will be facilitating the Q&A portion. To send a direct message, and I mention this because the Zoom has updated, so it looks a little different. When you open up the chat window, you will see at the top, it says everyone, and then next to it is a little plus sign, a blue plus sign that says new chat. You can click on that and you can scroll down to chat anybody in here. So if you see a friend and you want to say hi, or you want to message a question in a direct message to Erica Baruch, you can do that as well. As you have questions throughout the evening, please put them in the chat and Erica will make sure we get to all of those during the Q&A. And that's how we will be doing our Q&A tonight, is through the chat. So please feel free to submit those questions. If you need captions at any point, on the bottom of your screen, there is a closed caption CC icon. It says show captions. If you click on that, it will put those captions up on your screen for you to see. And if you have any questions throughout the evening, if you need technical support, please feel free to send me a message and I will help you navigate it as best I can. One of the things we do before we jump into our Quieting the Silence events is to remind everyone to take care of yourself. We know that these stories we're going to hear tonight are really powerful and they might impact each of us in different ways. And so we want to invite you, if you would like to have your camera on, to turn it on. If you prefer to have it off tonight, that's okay. If you need to take a break and step away, also okay. We will be sending out the recording at the end of this. So if at any point you do need to hop off, we will send the recording to everyone who registered. So without further ado, I'll begin our introductions. Again, my name is Carly. I am a licensed social worker and a Jewish educator. and I work for the Blue Dove Foundation, which is a mental health nonprofit focused on supporting mental health education in the Jewish community, alongside with BeWell, which is the Jewish Federations of North America's mental health initiative that we do in partnership with the Network for Jewish Human Service Agencies. And we are so grateful to be here tonight. And I'm excited to turn it over to my colleague, Erica. So Erica, I'm going to spotlight you now.
Thanks so much, Carly. I am so delighted to be here tonight along with our fabulous speakers and our partners in this evening together. So I just want to share a little bit about our organization, JFS, Jewish Disabilities Advocates. But first, I will offer a visual description. My name again is Erica Baruch. I'm a white woman. I have long brown hair that is currently pulled back into a ponytail. I'm wearing a navy blue boat neck shirt. And in the background, I have a very, very plain background. I have white walls and a white door behind me. So as I said, I work for JFS of Colorado, Jewish Family Service of Colorado, as part of the Jewish Disabilities Advocates Program. And we are a collaboration of 14 organizations in Denver and Boulder that are working to look at including individuals with a broad range of disabilities. So individuals who have physical disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, mental illness, chronic health conditions, sensory sensitivities, learning disabilities, really anything that you can think of under that broad range of the term disability, we think of as we do our work. And we are trying to make it possible for Jews with all those types of disabilities to participate fully in Jewish life. And it's a great endeavor. I'm very glad to be part of this collaborative. And it's also great to partner with organizations that are nationwide, like Carly and the BeWell Initiative, and also Noah, who I will turn it over to now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Noah Ateji. I use she, her pronouns. I work at JBI Library. I have brown, longish, wavy hair, olive skin, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a cream colored cardigan, and the top button is the one that's buttoned up and with a white shirt underneath. I'm currently located in New York City, and there's a big window behind me that shows nothing but black at the moment because it is dark out. And yeah, so I come from JBI Library. JBI Library supports anyone who is blind, low vision, or has a print disability in accessing Jewish life. And that ranges from accessing Jewish text through Braille, audio, and large print to Jewish culture and community. We offer a plethora of Jewish cultural programs and engagements, plenty of initiatives to get people involved in supporting accessibility towards blind, low vision, and print disabled folks in their communities as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about JBI Library and myself, and I'm truly honored to be here for this program, and honored to be in the presence of our speakers tonight. JBI website in the chat, someone asked, it's jbilibrary.org. Thank you. And oh, well, it's actually still me, so I'm going to keep going. I am, again, honored to be here tonight. I wanted to take the opportunity before we hear from our wonderful speakers to integrate a Jewish teaching for tonight. As many of you know, in the coming weeks, we will all be sitting around our tables with apples and honey, ringing in the Jewish New Year with sweetness and renewed energy. And 10 days after that, we arrive at Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, a day of intense contemplation. In a mere 2-week period, we're called to celebrate and atone, to confront our shortcomings with the utmost humility, and also ring in the future with clarity and purpose. Every year, I ask myself, how will I be ready to embrace each of these holidays in full? And that's when I realized that the month of Elul exists. And that is the Jewish month that we are currently in. And it's the month that I'd like to draw our attention towards. Elul is the month that precedes Tishrei and the High Holy Days. This month of Elul grants us the space between the end of summer and the beginning of the rush of the holidays to pause, During Elul, we orient ourselves towards reflection and introspection in preparation for the High Holy Days, so that when the High Holy Days come, we feel ready to take on what it asks of us. To illustrate the beauty of Elul and why I personally love it so much, there is a comparison I'd like to draw between Elul and the sound of the shofar. That is the ram's horn that is blown during the High Holy Days, in case anyone doesn't know. So for those who aren't familiar, the sound of the shofar consists of 4 sounds in a specific order, the name of each signifying something else. The first blow is called tekiah, which means that which is rooted. The second is called shvarim, which means that which is broken. The third is trua, which refers to an image of shaking. And finally, tekiah gedolah, a prolonged, powerful blast that concludes the shofar sequence. So if we start with tekiah and we compare it to Elul, what we first do is we confront is what is rooted within us, all that we are unwilling or afraid to change or acknowledge. In confronting our set ways, we approach shvarim, the next sound, breaking. We allow ourselves to feel. We shatter the mold that hasn't been serving us. Then trua, we finally see the brokenness that is before us. We release and we begin to heal. And in the last blast, tekiah gedolah, we put the pieces back together and we create a new mold. And so I don't think it could be any timelier that we're all gathered here tonight during the month of Elul to discuss the topic of mental health and visible and invisible disabilities. The spirit of this month is embodied in the theme of this program. We've all gathered here to listen to our speakers who, in the true spirit of Elul, are stepping into their truths courageously, breaking the molds, picking up the pieces, and rebuilding, casting away stigma, guilt, and fear, and inviting truth and kindness. In doing so, they are empowering us, the participants, to do the same. As we all hold a mirror to all the layers that make up who we are during this month of Elul, I encourage everyone to approach yourselves and others with grace, compassion, and love. And now I'm going to pass it on to Carly, who will introduce our speakers for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah, for that grounding. And I am so honored to get to introduce our speakers as we hear their moving stories tonight, exploring visible and invisible disabilities and how these impact our mental health. So many disabilities are not visible to others, and many mental illnesses can be considered invisible disabilities. But even our physical disabilities, which might be visible to other people, have a lot of parts that are challenging and can't be seen by other people. And so tonight we're really going to get to hear our speakers as they share stories about how their journeys have impacted their mental health. And so we are so honored. So our first speaker tonight is Rabbi Gabby Cohn. So Gabby, I'm gonna spotlight you and give your brief introduction. Rabbi Gabrielle Cohn was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia, and she was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa when in middle school and became legally blind in 2016. And she was actually the first person to be ordained with a guide dog, Josie, by her side. So we are so honored to hear her story tonight.
Thank you so much, Carly. Hi, y'all. I'm Rabbi Gabby Cohn. Gonna start my timer. I am a white woman with shoulder-length straight blonde hair that's currently down. I have black frames with rose-tinted glasses, and I'm wearing a royal blue cap sleeve blouse. And behind me is a piece of artwork that is made up of individually cut out letters, that is titled the map of the world, and it is every country that exists in the world. It's very cool and a little hectic on Zoom. Anyway, I am so grateful to be here and to share a little bit of my story with you. So, as Carly mentioned, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa back in 2008. I was 14 years old at the time. I was in 8th grade, and I grew up with my father having the diagnosis as well as my grandfather and my uncle. And so I knew my whole life that it was a possibility that I was going to have the disease, that I had a 50-50% chance essentially of um, having the disease and eventually going blind. And still, when I found out, it was it was really challenging. It was a hard uh, part of my life. You know, teenage years are typically not easy, right? Middle school is not an easy time for most people, and it was definitely not an easy time for me. And my mental health really declined rapidly around that time. And I don't know if it's because of my diagnosis or if it just happened to coincide with each other. I experienced a great deal of depression and anxiety and really was struggling with feeling a need to control anything that I could, right? I had this huge part of my life that I found out was not in my control and I was unable to do anything about. And there's no treatment for retinitis pigmentosa. And so I did everything I could to find control. I from things like s- testing the limits with drugs and alcohol, right? To self-harm, to really just grappling with trying to find a way to like express how I was feeling in a way that like made sense to my brain. And that was a long struggle for a long time. And I started therapy when I was in college and got official diagnoses and got the help that I needed. And it still has been quite a long journey. And as a rabbi, I'm like jumping around with the questions they gave us, but that's okay. As a rabbi, it's really hard to be open about having a mental illness or any disability in for that matter, because people expect their rabbi to be perfect, right? People want a rabbi who knows all the answers and can do all the things, and that's not rabbis, we're just people too, right? We don't necessarily know all the answers. I don't necessarily know all the answers. I don't nec- I'm 31 years old. I still have a lot of life experience to work through and I have a lot of shared life experience that I can share with my congregants and with other people as well. But I oftentimes don't find myself in Jewish spaces sharing about my mental illness because of the fact that I am a rabbi. Before I started rabbinical school, I was much more open in Jewish spaces about struggling. And once I started rabbinical school, I was still struggling and it felt more shameful to be struggling. Like I had a lot more shame around it. And that was really hard for me. And part of why I agreed to do this event is because I think that it is important to break down those um, taboo topics around clergy and mental illness and disability. Um, and I think that for me, um, growing up when I was first struggling, Judaism is where I went to find comfort and solace. I went to prayer. I turned to, especially, it's high holiday season, right? And I turned especially during high holidays. I'd sit and like Unatana Tokev, like who shall live and who shall die. Like that's a really hard prayer when you're struggling with like your purpose in life. And that was where I was at for a long time. And that I would like narrow in on that prayer out of all the prayers for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And the number of like Facebook memory, Facebook statuses I have that are just the words to that prayer with no context whatsoever is like interesting snippet into my brain. I feel like sometimes my Facebook statuses from years of old is always an interesting uh look into where my mental health was at any given point in my life because I created my Facebook when I was in 8th grade, so around the same time that I was diagnosed with RP and around the same time that I started having major depression and anxiety. And so for me, the spaces where I felt most supported in the community are with my mentors, with my teachers, right? With people in the Jewish community who like know me and maybe like I hadn't told them I was struggling, but they could tell, right? I wasn't trying to hide it so much. And then or they just had open space, right? They had open availability and were present to listen. And I found myself opening up to mentors and to teachers and getting the help that I needed through their support. It was in rabbinical school, it was some of the administrators at Hebrew Union College that helped me to get the help that I needed that allowed me to finish rabbinical school and to become a rabbi. And for me, my mental illness it's stabled out a lot more recently and like it still acts up, right? Like it is mental illness is an ongoing challenge for me. And so, even just today, I had an anxiety attack in the middle of the day. I started feeling like really uncomfortable in my skin and not wanting to, like, I needed to like take a step away from my work and I needed to like recompose myself. I took my guide dog for a walk and laid on the couch that is the only couch she is allowed on. And she like laid on top of me and we just snuggled for a few minutes until I was recentered and calmed down. But and as Carly mentioned before, I was declared legally blind in 2016, and every time my eyesight is it's a degenerative disease, so it's continually getting worse over time, and every time I hit some sort of block of like the way I'm doing things doesn't work anymore, um, is another challenge with grappling with the loss of control and the loss of things going the way that I want them to go, right? Like I don't have control and I don't have the ability to control at what speed my eyesight degenerates or at what speed or like some people who have RP don't ever lose all of their vision, and I don't know if that's the case for me or not. At this point I have 5 degrees of vision in each eye, and so really no peripheral vision whatsoever. At night I'm completely blind, and my guide dog is wonderful, and the process of using a cane and using a guide dog was so hard for me to accept, right? When I first started using a cane, I was living in Mississippi at the time. I had just been diagnosed legally blind, and I got set up with the Center for Blindness, and I would get rides to the center twice a week, learn to use a cane, and then I'd put my cane away and not touch it until my next lesson. Or I'd go out with friends at night and they'd be like, "Hey, where's your cane?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't need it." And then like it would get dark, I'd maybe pull it out, right? And and then over time, I became more and more reliant on my cane. And when I was living in Israel, this was 2018, 2019, I still wasn't comfortable using my cane on a regular basis. And I would trip and fall all the time and be asked by my friends, where's your cane? I'd say, oh, it's in my backpack. Well, what good is it doing you in your backpack, Gabby? Right? And so I'd pull it out and then I'd use it. And um, and then I got to the point where I was using my cane regularly once I moved back to New York City. And uh and gradually became more and more comfortable explaining my cane usage to people. And then I got paired with a guide dog in 2023 after 5 years of being on a wait list, I think. It was like 4 or 5 years of application and then a wait list because COVID and then so many things. But I got Josie, my guide dog, in October of 2023. Was actually at guide dog school when October 7th occurred a couple years ago. And that was an interesting shift also of not being in a Jewish space when a major Jewish event was happening. And grappling with like no one understood how I was feeling. And then being able to like hop on Zoom calls with my school while at guide dog school, right? Like I was in California and my school's in New York City, and I was hopping on Zoom calls for support and comfort. And then I was ordained in 2024 with my guide dog at my side, and uh started at a congregation in Corpus Christi, Texas, where it is a challenging place to be a blind person. Um, but I make do, right? I live a mile from the synagogue. I get rides from people a lot of the time because when it's 115-degree heat index, it's too hot to walk. But I am so grateful to everyone who has helped me on my journey along the way. My mentors, my teachers, my friends. I have a huge network of friends that help support me and encourage me to be open about what I'm dealing with, both mental health wise and also with my blindness. And um, yeah, I'm now over a year into my contract with my congregation here, and I'm a sole clergy member. We have 2 employees at my congregation, 2 full-time employees, and 136 families. And I have the opportunity to serve as a guide for all sorts of congregants, but I also have, kids in my congregation that are also legally blind. And I couldn't have imagined that happening in my first pulpit, but like it did, right? I am setting an example for kids right from the start. Anyway, and with that, I'm pretty much out of time, so I'm gonna stop.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Gabby, for sharing your story, and for sharing how hard it was to be open and yet still choosing to be open in this space with us tonight. We're so grateful and can't wait to hear more when we come back together for the question and answer. Okay, so our next speaker is Wally Klatch. So Wally, I am going to add a spotlight. And Wally was diagnosed with dementia 2.5 years ago, and he has a self-appointed mission to raise awareness and conversation about dementia. He moved to Denver, Colorado, a year and a half ago, and has been sharing his story with Coloradans ever since. So we are so grateful, Wally, to have you here on this more national platform tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. And let me start out also by describing myself. I'm a bald white guy with glasses and a green shirt, and my background is blurred so that nobody will see what's actually there. And let me say, related to what Rabbi Gabi just said, and also to what Deborah is going to talk about, I touch on both of those things and from a different angle. So let me quickly go into that. I was diagnosed with early stage dementia in October of 2022. And there was, of course, right away at the beginning, the shock period, everything's black, the word dementia, and all those kind of things. And what's happened, and I'll go through how it has happened, but the result is my dementia, I wouldn't call it exactly invisible. I would call it camouflaged. And so it's a variation on invisible, but I'd like to go through it because it's really, I get a lot of feedback from people that, I haven't been able to explain this to, and I appreciate this opportunity to go through it. When I was first diagnosed with early stage dementia, they start out calling it MCI, mild cognitive impairment. That's the label that the medical community and the general public uses for somebody with early dementia. And so I'm labeled immediately mild cognitive impairment. I'm cognitive. I'm impaired. I'm labeled as an impaired person right off the bat. And one of the things that has happened, and happened pretty quickly after I got over the shock period, I am cognitively impaired, but what I really feel is my brain is working a lot less, and that's freeing up a place for my feelings, what I call my guts. And my feelings are much more of a part of my life now than what they were before. I feel like it's a better balance. I'm in a better balance between my brain thinking and my guts feeling. It's a different balance than what it was before. So the result that's had for me is I'm more expressive. When I am speaking from my guts, from my feelings, that has opened up for me in ways that it wasn't like that before. So the phrase I use is I feel what I feel and I say what I feel. And it's much more of a feelings-based existence and relationship to myself and to the world around me than what it was before. So what the result of that is I can be in conversations and feel a lot of things and express a lot of things. And as I say, these things are going from my guts out of my mouth. My brain is not part of this, which is what really opens this possibility. The invisible part here is that my brain is working much less and much slower than was before. So things that are not connected with emotions, just in an everyday conversation that I have with somebody, I frequently have to put up my hand, even if they're talking at a normal tone and at a normal pace, I'm not able to absorb things quickly. So I have to first absorb them and then to think about them. I get a lot of feedback that I change my mind a lot because even if I hear something and put it in my brain, it has to sit there for quite a while before I can actually grasp it. So that's the invisible part. And there's a lot of activity about my dementia. There's both physical impacts. With Parkinson's, there's the handshaking, the balance problems, the feelings of faintness, all kinds of physical things like that. But those are all invisible. When I'm sitting with a person or a group of people, and I'm being very robust in how I speak and very energetic and very wide range thinking, because another effect of this is I don't have all the parameters that that I used to have, all the breaks. I feel it and I say it. So I'll kind of go and go. And so when somebody sees me, often I'm told, you don't look like you have dementia. And I understand that completely. My dementia is camouflaged within my condition. And that's what I mean, the difference between invisible. My actual dementia is invisible, but in terms of how it comes out, it's camouflaged. It's camouflaged by the side of my dementia that allows me to be much more expressive, and I feel a lot more expressive, a lot more open, a lot less imitations. So that's what I mean to say. And one of the reasons I'm glad to be able to bring this up, there's a lot of things. Many people know somebody with dementia, or maybe somebody has some feelings for themselves. There's a lot of things to be aware of in relating to somebody with dementia, to get into their world. And it's not easy to do, but I'm happy to explain to this group, and whenever I have this opportunity, distinguish between what's camouflaging a person's actual condition or what's invisible to somebody outside to what's really going on and who the person is and where they're at. So that I wanted to say, related to what Rabbi Gabi said, that there's visible disabilities and there's invisible disabilities, and there's also camouflage or distracting my ability to speak my characteristic now of being, I cry a lot. I had to create new words for a lot of things that happened to me. I don't call it crying, I call it gut weep. It's because it's weeping that comes from my emotions, from my guts. So I have a whole page of a new vocabulary I had to create, but there you go. My brakes are off. You know, dementia has done there's that side of dementia, but let's be careful about this. This is what I call the golden moment. This is not dementia. There's two phrases that I use, two very dark humors. One is dementia is enough to make you crazy, and the other is dementia is a no-brainer. In the end, somebody with dementia, it's a sort of a joke, but the fearsome part about it is that's where it gets to. So having given that background about dementia in terms of as a visible disability, an invisible disability, or a camouflage disability, let me go on to where this is going. There's the classic picture of somebody with dementia that's drooling, that is incapable of taking care of themselves, who is can't speak, can't communicate. I don't need to go into all that. I'll trust that everybody has an image of what dementia leads to. I've made the decision that I'm not going to get there. I will end my own life before I get to that point. And there's of course, a lot of, we could have conversations for hours about that. And it's also very tricky when people in my condition get together and talk. There's always well, when is the right time to do it? Because it always has to be too soon. You can't wait until you're in the dementia condition, because then you're not able to actually do what you plan to do. So, but I'm really reluctant, and again, let me present something from my feelings. I don't think of it as committing suicide. I think of committing suicide as being, let me not say that. I have two choices. I'm going to transition the way dementia is going to take me to transition, or I'm going to transition my way, self-transition. So that's how I see this situation. It's not, do I want to kill myself or not? I am going to transition, and it will either be the way dementia leads transitioning, with the 7 phases of dementia and how long each one can take. It can be done in a month, or it can take many, many years as you're going through this thing. So that's one choice. And I don't advocate, God forbid, I don't advocate for anybody else what they should or should not do. I'm speaking for myself alone. But when I look and see those are the two choices, to dementia transition or to self-transition, I've already made my choice for myself, and I've shared it with my family. My kids know. They both know, they know both about my condition and about my plan. So those are in place that my kids know about. And so now what I do is I go to my neurologist, but I'm more focused on monitoring my own condition. I feel like I'm the best one, not to point a finger or look at somebody else to get guidance from them, to feel myself. What is my brain condition? What's my physical condition? And all kinds of things like that. So I'm monitoring that, and that's my plan when I get to that. So you could consider that a invisible disability. I don't hide that this is my plan, but I only express it when I think it's appropriate, and I feel like this group it's an appropriate point because it's one of the topics that we are talking about. Okay, so given that, I will just pick up on one more topic that Rabbi Gabby's talked about. I'm looking for guidance in many places, in all kinds of places. A person who's lost in the desert, like the children of Israel, is glad to look at whatever star they see above and try to find their way based on that. And one of the places I looked for guidance is from the Torah. And so I was curious, what does the Torah say about dementia? So what I started to do was look into each week's portion of the Torah and see if dementia is referenced. And I've been doing that for about a year now, and every single week's Torah portion has a reference to dementia. It either describes dementia, refers to dementia. Pardon me for saying so. There are personalities in the Torah that I read about them and I say that person has dementia. I won't name names other than to say the story of the 13 verses of Lot's wife. Those 13 verses that talk about Lot's wife are the story of dementia from start to finish. But the point is, I have looked into the Torah because, yes, that is a stable place in a world that's in complete chaos. And so I have a website, dementiainthetorah.com, where I post each week, and that's probably more for me than anybody else. So I can feel, okay, the Torah is recognizing this condition. I can grasp onto the Torah and read it from a dementia perspective and find there those references to dementia. So those are some of the aspects of dementia that relate to disabilities, visible, invisible, and how to relate to them.
Thank you so much, Wally. This is Carly speaking again for sharing your feelings with us, and for helping us understand your journey. We're so grateful, and we look forward to hearing from you again during the question and answer period. And I am honored to invite our final speaker for the evening, Deborah Green, who is a Jewish educator, a blogger, and an activist. And she has written extensively about suicide, loss, and traumatic grief on her blog, reflectingoutloud.net, as well as in many publications. And she is part of Congregation Har Hashem in Boulder, Colorado. So Deborah, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Deborah. As Carly said, I am a 56-year-old woman. I have salt and pepper mid-length hair. I'm wearing purple-rimmed glasses. I have on an orange shirt, and I'm in my husband's office. So behind me are many bookshelves filled with Jewish books. So a little bit about me. I am the proud mom of 3 incredible young women. I am married to Rabbi Fred Green, And on April 20th of 2015, I was out running some errands, standing in the aisle of Whole Foods, got a phone call from my brother who told me that our father had died by suicide. And I do want to stop here just to give a little bit of content warning that I will be talking about suicide and suicide loss. So if that's a difficult topic for anyone, I do want to make sure that I address that up front. And I did just want to address language-wise, for me, it's very important to use the words died by suicide in regard to my father's death. So in 2015, on that morning, my whole life changed in an instant. And I will say very clearly, there is the me I was before and the me I became after that moment. And I really felt incredibly broken. And I was filled with a lot of questions. Predominantly, the main question that really comes to mind for a suicide loss survivor is why? And I will say that my father was struggling with anxiety and depression. And I knew that things were bad, but I didn't understand how bad they were. And since we're talking a lot about invisible disabilities, very often people who are struggling with suicidal ideation will mask what they are thinking. So it's very often that you can encounter someone, and even if you know that they're struggling, you really have no sense of just how bad it is. And that was the case for me. So I think one of the things that I want to talk about is the question came to mind about what supports did I find or did I lean on, especially in the Jewish community. And after burying my father, I went online and I was searching for sources of comfort and sources of support. And I found very quickly online, putting together the two concepts of Judaism and support for suicide loss, I found nothing. There was nothing there for me. And all of the things that I did find were scholarly examinations about Judaism's condemnations of suicide. I found dated articles about people who have died by suicide being buried outside of the main areas of the cemetery. And really what I found was judgment. I didn't find any compassion. I didn't find any comfort. I didn't find anything that told me that I, as a mourner, had a place in Judaism, that my kind of loss had a place in Judaism. And shortly after my father's death, there was a fellow congregant. We were in Atlanta at the time, and she had lost her husband to suicide. And she took me to a support group, a suicide loss support group. And somebody shared something with me there that has stayed with me to this day. She was further on in her journey, and she said to me, "You will have to come to terms with the fact that the father you loved killed the father you loved." And I remember thinking, yes, that's exactly what I have to do. But how? How do I do that? And how do I find comfort? And how do I find guidance in that? And for me, because I couldn't find it, I started to create it for myself. As someone who always loved to write, I started to write a lot about what I was feeling, about my anger, about my guilt, about my questions. I started to write my own prayers because I couldn't find anything anywhere else. And slowly, the things that I started to write made it out into the larger universe. And I started connecting with other suicide loss survivors, not just locally, but around the world. And I started to find a lot of comfort in that because I didn't know anybody else like me. I didn't know anybody except for this one congregant who had taken me to a meeting. I didn't know anyone else who had lost somebody by suicide. And I think one of the things I want to share is that as a suicide loss survivor, something I really came to understand a lot about is the issue of complicated grief. Wasn't a term I really understood before, but I just want to share here that complicated grief is defined as a prolonged and intense form of grief that can hinder the mourning process, impair functioning and quality of life, and puts us at greater risk for severe mental health struggles. So my story is twofold. I lost my father to suicide, and I didn't really understand that the kind of grief that I was experiencing opened up a whole other realm of struggle for me that didn't even allow me to get to the grief. People who lose someone to suicide during the first year are at far greater risk of dying by suicide themselves. And I didn't know that. And when people came to my home for Shiva in those early days, people asked very probing, personal, and I would now say inappropriate questions. There's sort of a morbid curiosity around suicide loss that I think, in part, people ask because they want to put some distance between themselves and the suicide loss survivor. If they can ask these questions and it doesn't look like anything that they recognize in their own life, then maybe it won't touch them. And I didn't know that I could say, I don't want to answer that. I didn't know that I could say, I don't think that's appropriate. I didn't know that I could say, please don't call my father selfish. I just answered. And every time I answered, I lost a part of myself. And while we were still living in Atlanta, we had plans to move to Colorado. My husband was to start a new position here. And I thought it was going to make things a lot harder for me to make this move. But what I found was that the people that I was friends with in Atlanta who knew me before very much wanted that person to return to them. And that was not possible for me, not yet, not at that time. And so when we moved to Colorado, people didn't know the old me, and I found them much more willing to step into the space of grieving and of the messiness of all of it with me. And something I just want to share, because we were asked kind of the question about where is awareness lacking. And I think that, the CDC talks about the importance of connectedness as a protective factor for suicide. And they define connectedness as the degree to which a person or group is socially close, interrelated, or shares resources. And it goes on further to say that positive attachments to schools and organizations, including faith communities, can increase an individual's sense of belonging. And I think that we in our Jewish communities are starting to make a lot of moves in that direction, but I would argue that we're still not there. We need to have more people trained in mental health first aid. We need to continue to break down the stigma around conversations around mental health and suicide loss. And I would say we need to really focus on the idea of postvention, which again is defined as a critical and defined and organized response in the aftermath of a suicide to facilitate healing, mitigate negative effects of suicide loss, and prevent suicide among people who are at higher risk after losing someone to suicide. One suicide, studies say, impacts up to 135 people. And our congregation, at Congregation Har Hashem, we are trying to put forth these 4 ideas for people who come into our doors, that they'll be noticed, they'll be named, they'll be known, and they'll be needed. But as I was driving home today, I thought about another thing that should be there, which is nurtured. People who are struggling need to be nurtured, and we need to know how to show up, and we need to have the language around that. And that comes from our clergy and our educators and our lay leaders and our congregants being willing to step into the world of learning about how to approach people with mental health issues, how to notice them, how to name them, how to nurture them. And suicide and suicide loss creates a level of grief that is very lonely and very isolating. And I didn't know how to show up in Jewish spaces. So I created my own tabernacle where I carried the broken pieces of myself until I could figure out how to build those spaces, not only for myself, but in partnership with my own husband. And in telling my story, I hope and I believe that I've encouraged other people who are in positions of leadership at congregations to do the same. And I think in doing that, in really learning how to have those conversations, we can create spaces of belonging for all people. And I just thank you for letting me share my story tonight.
Deborah, thank you so much for sharing about this dichotomy of who you were and who you have become, and the work that you've done for yourself and for others to create what you could not find when you needed it. So thank you so much. I am going to turn it over now to Erica, and I'm going to spotlight all of our speakers so that we can do some question and answer. As you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat.
So thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to all of our speakers. And in full disclosure, I am also a member of Har Hashem. So I belong to the same synagogue as Deborah and her husband, who's the rabbi. And I will pull from what he often says is, you guys have done a great job of creating a brave space here. And I want to thank you for being so brave and sharing your stories and sharing so openly and being vulnerable with this audience. And we couldn't appreciate it more, because I do believe, like Deborah just said, that when we share our stories, we create space for others to share their stories. And that is what hopefully leads to reducing some of the stigma? And that is the question that came up in the chat was, no, I think you referred to stigma in the opening remarks. And so one of the questions is to each of you, how do you or have you experienced the stigma, which you've touched upon? And also, how do you think that we as Jewish communities can help further address the stigma, reduce the stigma around mental illness and around other invisible disabilities? So Rabbi Gabby, if it's okay, I'll start with you.
Great, yeah. This is Rabbi Gabby. I feel like I have experienced the stigma in a lot of different ways, and I feel like part of it is like internalized stigma, right? That like I know for me, I have a lot of internalized stigma of like, what are other people going to think if I share X, Y, Z? But also there's this idea in Jewish spaces that like, you know, that Jews are immune to certain things, right? Like I teach teens and I had a student say this week, like, oh, Jews don't do that. And I was like, actually, yes, they do. Right? Like the fact that we are just humans, right? That we have all the same life experiences that other people have, and that there's nothing wrong with struggling, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that you're struggling. There's actually a lot of strength in admitting that you're struggling. And I think that the more our teachers and our clergy and our staff at synagogues and in Jewish spaces can emphasize that concept, that there is strength in admitting to having a problem or to struggling with something, the better we'll be able to break down the stigma.
Yes, I 100% agree. Thank you so much. Wally, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes. What I found from relating to people on this, maybe it's called stigma, or I think of it in terms of silence. It's not that people don't want to talk about it or that there's a stigma. Nobody talks about it. And I can say it's astonishing. When I get up in front of any people and I start talking about it openly and brutally, it's amazing the response. It's not a stigma that they say, no, I don't want to hear about that. They say, wow, I know people with dementia. I'm afraid of dementia, but nobody talks about it. So I would just distinguish. There's stigma, which means somebody is against it or something pushes it away, and silence, where it's just not talked about. And I think anybody in any place who talks about any of these topics, what Rabbi Gabi talked about, what Deborah talked about, or what I talked about, just talking about it, people are amazingly interested in hearing people talk about these kind of topics.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And I think, Wally and I have been in several sessions together, and we have mentioned that in some ways dementia is the cancer of 50 years ago, that people refuse to talk about it. And so Wally is on this mission, as he has said, and as Carly introduced him, to really raise awareness and understanding of a condition that isn't talked about, that many people are experiencing. In fact, it's very hard to find someone who isn't in their extended family touched by dementia, but it's something that isn't talked about. And I think, and I'll turn it over to you, Deborah, to say also, something that I think we don't talk about often as well is what happens for people post-suicide and suicide survivors, and we don't really have those discussions openly in community either. So just want you to add on to that as well.
This is Deborah. I think that part of my feeling around, for my personal experience after my father's loss, one thing I really didn't want to carry around was shame. That doesn't mean I felt personal shame because I felt that I failed my father. That's different. What I wasn't willing to hold was shame around the way he died. And I think that came for me from the experience of raising a child who's now a young adult with autism. And we had kind of, as parents, approached her autism the same way. We're going to talk about it. There's no shame. So I think that was ingrained in me. I think that one of the issues around suicide loss and suicide in general is that people do not feel equipped to engage in the conversations. And so I think part of it is from the clergy, as I said, to the lay leaders, to the educators, we need to be engaging in mental health first aid the same way we get trained in CPR first aid, because asking the question of someone who's struggling, someone who, knowing what the signs are of somebody who is struggling and maybe at risk for suicide, and asking them the question, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Do you have a plan? Those questions can save somebody's life, but they are scary questions to ask. And I think congregations and Jewish federations and Jewish communities need to start building that toolbox as basic as stocking the first aid that's hanging up in the hallway, having everything that they need to serve somebody if they were to have a physical emergency, CPR training. Let's talk about it. And I'll just say that a friend shared with me recently, and he's a rabbi, that he wanted to bring in a speaker. This is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. He wanted to bring in a speaker, and there were people on his staff who were concerned about having a speaker come in and speak about suicide, because there is still this belief that if you talk about suicide, you are going to encourage someone who might be struggling to actually try and attempt to end their own life. And that is a misnomer that can actually really harm people. So ending the stigma is as simple as talking about it. And I can tell you, when you start talking about it, you start to find out all sorts of people who have struggled with it or lost someone to it. And I had one woman say to me, I wrote a piece. It ended up getting picked up by the Washington Post. It went out into the world. And it was a piece about the women who surrounded me when I was in Whole Foods and found out about my father and these angels who took care of me. And this woman wrote to me and said, I've struggled with suicidal ideation every day. And when I read your piece, I realized that this thought that I had that my family would be better off without me and would feel somehow less burdened if I were gone wasn't true, because I got to hear from somebody who lost someone to suicide and what they were left with. So talking about it can save a life, and that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. I think there's so many good opportunities to raise our voices, to talk about it. And I am hopeful that, and I know that I'm in Boulder also, so we live in a little bit of a bubble, but my daughter participates in a program called Coley's Closet, where they have peer-to-peer mentors who go into high schools and talk about suicide. And I know it's a really impactful program, but also that like with everything that we talked about tonight, raising our voices, sharing our stories as we are doing this evening is really what leads other people to be able to do that. So again, I thank you. I know, Rosa, I know you have asked if you could unmute perhaps and ask a question. So Carly, maybe you could help Rosa unmute.
Yes, Rosa, I'm gonna click a button that will allow you to unmute yourself. Maybe we can move to the next question and then we can come back to Rosa.
Absolutely. So, what do you wish people understood about your daily lives is a question that came up. So again, if it's okay, Rabbi Cohen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this is Rabbi Cohn. One of the things that I wish people, and I'll be brief, because I know we're short on time. One of the things I wish people knew about my daily life is that not every day looks the same. That there are ups and downs, and there's ups and downs with my vision, there's ups and downs with my mental health, right? Like that just because I can do something one day doesn't mean I can do it the next.
Thank you. Wally?
Something I really feel day to day is I'm detaching from the world the way I always knew it. It's hard for me sometimes to come into somebody else's life. When I'm having a conversation with somebody, I mean, the normal thing is you talk and you listen and you get into their life. And I just can't absorb things well enough. And that's something I feel. Please recognize that somebody with what they call cognitive dysfunction just can't do what is considered normal. And I'm really feeling that day to day, I'm just not functional the way I used to be or how somebody may perceive me to be now. And that's not out of, anger or anything like that. It's loss of capability. And when I can talk like that and somebody else is willing to come into my life, my world, it helps the connection a lot.
It's great. It's very helpful. And Deborah?
I think one thing I would like people to know is that there are triggers all the time, everywhere, walking past people who say things like something happened and it made them, they want to kill themselves, or sitting in a group and somebody is frustrated and they, do the imagery of putting a gun to their head. I never realized how much difficult language I would have to maneuver through on a day-to-day basis.
It is hard. There's all these things that are triggers, and people, we say this a lot in the work that I do, that people who may have a good intent and sometimes they just don't even realize, that have a really hurtful impact. And so the more we can learn and be able to understand what is hurtful to others, the better we can do as a community. I have another question, which is, if no one knows you're struggling, how can they help and support you? So maybe Deborah, I'll start with you on that one.
I think it goes back to that whole idea, I'll say, at our congregation about the noticing. I think if we can create communities where we notice one another, and we maybe notice that you haven't been coming to synagogue, or we notice that maybe your demeanor has changed, or whatever it is, I think it's about that sense of connectedness. And I would say, don't be afraid to ask if you think somebody is struggling. I think it's okay to say, I've noticed and I'm wondering, and open the door.
Great, great. Um, I'll, sorry, I accidentally muted myself. Asking you, Wally, and you, Rabbi Cohen, again, the same question, but also this was another question that came in, so you might want to tag on to it a little bit, is what are some of the things that have made you feel seen or noticed, as Deborah just said? And conversely, what has made you feel unseen or not noticed? So Rabbi Cohen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, this is Rabbi Cohen. So in terms of not knowing if someone's struggling, right? Like if I personally am struggling and I don't articulate it, I can't assume that someone else is going to reach out or check on me. But also as a clergy person, I pay attention to like body language, to tone of voice, to um if someone, there's a difference between a child that is like perky and jumping around like when they show up for Sunday school versus like clinging to mom or dad or grandparent, right? Or like hiding, like I had a kid show up this week that, normally is perky and outgoing and was clinging to mom real tight. And so like that's just one like sign of, oh, maybe this kid needs a like personal check-in, right? So there are ways that we can, like Deborah was saying, there are ways that we can cue into, especially if we are in a community where we know people, the more we are involved in a community, the more we can know when someone is not where they have been. And in terms of things that have helped me feel seen is, when people who do know me have asked like, hey, is everything all right? Or like, what's been going on, right? Like, just tell me about your week, right? Things like that, things as little as like, how was your week, can be really helpful. And where I haven't felt seen is when I've disclosed that I'm struggling to like a friend. And like I had a friend in high school who responded to my struggles with, well, there are kids in Africa who are starving. And I was like, yes, and I am severely depressed right now, right? Like, and that was kind of the end of that friendship. And but oftentimes we hear the like, well, so and so has it worse, right? Or did you hear about so and so and like all the things they're dealing with? That's where I oftentimes feel less seen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Wally, would you like to comment on this question?
Sure, just briefly. I have a variation on it because I don't hesitate. Anytime even I feel something peculiar, something's not clicking in a conversation, I say, pardon me, I have dementia. My mind isn't working right. I'm completely straightforward about it so that my problem isn't is somebody guessing that something's wrong. I go ahead and say it quite clearly. And there's two things that I would say help me feel seen. One is sometimes when I say I have dementia, the other person talks about all their relatives with their dementia, and every dementia is different. And okay, tell me about all them and ask me something about mine also. I do get into, I don't feel seen because I've triggered them to talk about their whole world, and they don't get to mine, and so I feel like they're more interested in. Of course, that's theirs, but I feel unseen in that. And the other thing that I'll say, which is so appropriate for this and this conversation, and a lot of things that Erica has done. This is my mission in life. This is how I define it, to raise awareness and conversation about dementia. So I believe in dementia, one of any illness is to have a mission. Any mission. If you have a mission, that helps you feel like you're flowing with something. There's the guy that has the mission to go to the animal shelter every day and sing to the animals. It doesn't have to be more than that, but having a mission. So if somebody has some condition or some illness, inviting them to speak about it or to talk about it, let them find out what their mission is and help them fulfill their mission. And pardon me for saying so, this is my life. If I having a mission, it's where I'm at and working very hard at it, and not having a mission, I think would really, so those are some of the things that when you become aware of some things, those are some of the ways I'm feeling about.
Thank you very much. And Deborah, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think that I had a mission too for a long time, like just like Wally shared around my father's death. I was driven to make meaning out of something that felt so utterly meaningless to me. And I I think that I also needed people around me who could really honor that need that I had and support me in that way. But mostly what I needed was people who could show up and see me in my brokenness and just be with me. And I think we are as a society so incredibly uncomfortable with grief, and when it's complicated grief, it's that much more uncomfortable. And when I moved here, I went on a walk. People would take me on hikes because that's what you do in Colorado. And I remember saying to someone, I feel really badly because when we came here to interview, the person you met, I'm just not her anymore. And she said to me, we don't know her. We don't know that person. So we're just going to show up and accompany this person right now. So I guess what I would say is step into the mess. Grief is messy. Mental health issues are messy and they're hard. Step into it and accompany somebody.
Thank you. Yes, I think that that's something we hear over and over again from people with a variety of different disabilities and mental illnesses. They don't necessarily want somebody to come in and fix the problem or even see it as a problem. You just want somebody to come in and be present. And I think we all have the ability to do that if we can be brave enough to do so. So I'm glad everyone who is on this call today is hearing your words, and hopefully that is something that we can do. Um, I do see one other question, and this is about Judaism. So one individual is expressing that because of a lot of disappointments, they've lost their enthusiasm in their Jewish faith, and they will read the Torah, but the excitement is not there, and they want to regain that excitement again. So I actually, it's okay with you, Deborah. I would start with you on this question and ask. She asks how, and so if you have some words.
I stayed away from Jewish spaces. I found the prayers so difficult. Any prayer that spoke to an intervening God in any way left me questioning, then where was that God when my father died? Rabbi Gabby mentioned the Unatana Tokef. I always struggled with that prayer, but the way my father died is in that prayer, and it broke me to try to go through High Holy Day services. I'm fortunate in that I'm married to the rabbi, and we had a steep learning curve, but we got to learn it together and to slowly begin to adapt Jewish spaces to have more inclusive language, to have alternative prayers, to think about things differently. And I would say that it's important to have those conversations with the clergy in your community, with the Jewish communal leaders in your community, because like so many things, if people aren't touched by it, they don't know how something might impact people in the community who are struggling. They don't know how the words of a prayer can actually cause harm. And I just think it's an important thing to go into those spaces. I don't go to services. I'm being very honest here. I cannot listen to the prayers, but I've written my own prayers and I do things in my own home and I go outside. And for me, that is still my sacred space. And so I think we also need to expand our ideas along with clergy and lay leaders. What is a Jewish space? What is a pathway in? And if someone can't find a pathway, maybe in partnership with other Jews in the community or Jewish support groups or Jewish leadership, we can create different ones. Sacred space can be in a synagogue, and it can be out on a hike, and it can be sitting by the water. And we need to expand those ideas.
Beautiful, beautiful. I know, Wally, you do a lot of outdoor time, finding space in the outdoors as well. So maybe you could add on to that, but you also write about Dementia in the Torah every week. So again, just responding to someone who's lost their enthusiasm for Judaism, how might they
Okay.
regain it?
I'll be glad to. I can't help but say, Deborah, you said now and you said before when you've created a lot. Things that are missing, I've heard you say several times, where something is missing, you've created to fill it in. And that's beautiful. And I created the vocabulary for, because there wasn't there. There's so many phrases, so many verses in the Torah. The one with therefore choose a life, which is always referred to saying don't kill yourself. I read the whole verse and I came to the conclusion that it's my obligation to end my life. In other words, a person can look at it different, or there's a parsha called Kitetse lemilchama, when you go out to battle. And that whole verse tells me as a person with dementia, Kitetse, when you go out, when you are no longer how you were, lemilchama, and you have to fight a battle, al oyevecha, against new enemies. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, I understand if you accept all about Judaism the way you've been taught it and it's been shoved into your mind, can I re-chew it the same way over again and be excited about it? No. But one of the things I can talk about dementia is being released from that and being able to look at all these experiences and the Torah and Jewish practices without that history and bringing your authentic self into it. There's a lot to be found out there.
Great, thank you, Wally. And of course, Rabbi Cohn, I mean, I have to end with you on, getting how do you find your enthusiasm for Judaism?
Yeah, thank you. So, I think the key is that Judaism isn't just one thing, right? Judaism is more than sitting at services. I have congregants that will say, I feel like such a bad Jew. I haven't been to services in so long. I'm like, that doesn't make you a bad Jew. Not everyone goes to services. Services aren't everyone's cup of tea, right? Reading Torah, not everyone's cup of tea. It's about finding what in relation to Judaism excites you, right? And that's different for every individual. For some people, it's social justice. I have colleagues that are social justice rabbis through and through. Me, I'm not a social justice rabbi. That's not what excites me about Judaism. I do social justice work, and that's not why I went into the rabbinate. For me, when I'm struggling, I personally turn to one thing that Deborah mentioned, doing personal prayers that aren't the prayers in the liturgy. And there's this concept in Judaism called hitbodedut, which is essentially where you talk out everything in your head to God or to a higher power of your understanding, right? And during the pandemic, I was struggling and I was like, read about this, learned about it in class, and was like, well, you're supposed to go out in nature, and I live in New York City. And then I like did some research, and there was this option of doing it under your covers, with the idea of it being like a sensory deprivation type situation where like you're in the dark, it's a little quieter, like sounds are muffled. And so I started going under my covers in my dark room and just talking out loud to God. And sometimes that is what I need, right? Sometimes that is releasing and helps me to connect to my Judaism. And that, if you talk to like the average person on the street, are they going to think that's Judaism? Not necessarily, but it is Judaism, right? It's based in Jewish practice. And my friends who aren't Jewish joke that it's my blanket fort with God, right? I have my own blanket fort with God, and that's how I express Judaism. And there's no one right way and there's no wrong way to express Judaism. That that and there are rabbis who can help you explore and find what the right path and right form of practicing Judaism is for you. And there's also always, mental health professionals that can help with the mental health side of it. But I think that, connecting with a rabbi is always super helpful in finding because for every individual it's different. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Again, can't thank all three of you enough for being here tonight, for sharing your stories. I think you've given every one of us on this Zoom lots to think about, and hopefully lots to talk about, because we want to continue the conversation. So I invite everyone here to take one thing away from tonight that you're going to share with somebody else. And with that, I want to turn it back over to Noah, who is going to help us conclude our evening.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again to our three speakers, to Rabbi Gabby Cohn, Deborah Green, Wally Klotch. Thank you all so much. Each of your experiences are so important, and it was also beautiful to hear the ways that your experiences interwove with each other's. And I know I am going to take a lot from tonight, so I appreciate you all and thank you. I wanted to say some things going forward. First, thank you to everyone who came tonight. Really, we appreciate everyone who took the time tonight to come to listen about mental health and its intersection with visible and invisible disabilities. This is an important conversation, and just you showing up today shows how much you care. So thank you for being here. And thank you to the organizations that collaborated to create this event. BeWell, Blue Dove Foundation, the Jewish Family Services, Jewish Disability Advocates. I'm from JBI, Noah, and it's been a lovely partnership to do and to make this come to fruition. So thank you again, Carly, Erica, for doing this. And I'd like to say just one logistic thing, which is to stay on the lookout for a follow-up email that will include resources, the recording of the event tonight, and a feedback survey. Oh, hi, Rosa. Are you speaking? Okay. I don't know if she's speaking. Rosa, I know you didn't get a chance to ask a question. Perhaps we can talk after, because I have your number, and maybe I can get your question after, and we can see what comes of that. And
It's unbelievable. It's
Sorry?
a comment. It's a comment I wanted to make,
Oh,
which I
sure.
believe is very important. Okay, I presume that we are talking today to an audience which is blind or almost blind. Isn't that so? That was my impression, because it was organized by JBI.
Yeah, it's a mix of folks tonight. Yeah.
Yes. So my question, it's not even a question, it's a comment.
Oh,
Actually,
sure.
people who are losing our sight, like the first speaker, myself as well, in the same boat, we develop mental conditions. We become very depressed. It's inevitable. to become depressed when you lose your vision. Also, the fact that the audience beyond us, beyond those people who are blind or have dementia or lost somebody to suicide, people whom it didn't happen are afraid of those conditions. They fear it to such an extent that fearness of blindness, I think, is in second place after the fear of death. Therefore, we are talking to people who already are suffering through those conditions we are just discussed today. But we need help by approaching people outside us. Talking to us about those problems is lovely. Sharing is lovely. But we need help in addressing the community at large to finally accept us as equals, not as people who are not needed by anyone, and who is actually somebody everybody is afraid of to be close to. That's what's the main problem for us.
Absolutely, Rosa. That's such an important point. Some of the people who most need to be here to listen perhaps might not be. And we want to, make ourselves aware that there's so much left to be said and shared, and so many people for whom they need to listen to these stories. If not for the way it will inform the way they treat others, but how it will inform the way they treat themselves too. And so perhaps there's plenty of people out there who simply aren't open to confronting that because they're afraid to confront it within themselves as well. So thank you for raising that, Rosa. That was really important.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And excuse me, I would truly appreciate if there is a way for somebody like me who's blind, who cannot use chat, also to participate in asking
Yes.
questions or making
Yeah,
comments in the future.
absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry that that there was some trouble with getting you to unmute. So I'll make sure that in the next time that we provide a little more time for that. So I'm sorry that there was difficulty with that. But I'm making a note of it, and I'm glad you were able to chime in now because what you said was really important. So thank you, Rosa. I appreciate it. And I will see you soon on a JBI program. Okay, I think I said most of my notes, but I did want to just close with a prayer before we end tonight. And then once I finish the prayer, feel free to hop off. And I hope everyone has a wonderful night and has a really meaningful High Holy Days ahead as well. So this is the Misha Berach for Wholeness. And Carly was able to provide this, and it's really beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. May we be present with ourselves at this moment. May the one who blesses us hear us in our praying, so that we may embrace the good moments and honor the challenging moments, and be reminded that there is beauty in rebuilding and growth. May we restore ourselves by incorporating our lived experiences to make us stronger. May we be at ease and recognize our inherent wholeness, and may it be so. Thank you, everyone.